As many of you are aware, the last two sermons I've preached from this pulpit centered on the issue of racial justice in this country. And those sermons focused attention specifically on the current plight of Black Americans. And I believe that such focus and attention is certainly, absolutely justified. But I'd like to take a moment this morning to acknowledge that the fight for racial justice in this country encompasses far more than just Black Americans. White supremacy affects and encompasses more than just those labeled as Black. The new racial justice movement will also require us to confront issues facing brown Americans, including how we as a nation are going to address the growing immigration crisis not only in our own country but across the world. It will also require us to continue to grapple with our current day treatment of Native Americans, and on a far deeper level than simply asking whether Washington's NFL team should change its name. It will require us to understand the unique difficulties faced by Asian Americans, a racial classification that is often invisible when it comes to conversations on race. Moreover, we must also acknowledge that systems of oppression are not limited to domains of race. We recognize that in spite of many advances, we still live in a patriarchal society that privileges and gives advantages to men over women. We recognize that in spite of even recent major advances, we still live in a heteronormative culture that allows, if not tacitly encourages, both implicit and explicit discrimination against gay, lesbian, and bisexual Americans. We recognize that we live in a society that most definitely favors the cisgendered, and that the transgender community regularly faces a type of discrimination and fear and prejudice that few of us can even imagine. And there are other marginalized populations, even less visible, who face prejudice and oppression as well: the impoverished, the disabled, the chronically ill or in pain, the elderly. Justice for all. It's a daunting task, one that can easily discourage us back to sleep, to embrace the comfort of inertia. The fight for justice and equity is and will continue to be a long and a hard one, certainly not for the faint of heart and impossible to achieve by any one individual. In other words, it's just the kind of task that we Unitarian Universalists were built to handle. I want to thank all of you who listened to my last two sermons with open minds and open hearts. I know the subject matter was difficult. I asked us to re-examine and in many cases redefine our understanding of concepts like racism and white supremacy, and this was uncomfortable because these new definitions swallow nearly all of us into them. It requires courage, vulnerability, and incredible intellectual flexibility to grapple with new perspectives that might put ourselves in a less than favorable light. For some, the last couple of weeks may have felt like I was asking you to try on new bathing suits and look in the mirror underneath fluorescent lights. But that openness, that willingness to be challenged by new or different perspectives is characteristic of those who call themselves Unitarian Universalists, and therefore part of the answer that I might give to Danielle and Ricky in their quest to understand what it really means to be UU. And that characteristic in particular is one reason that I'm proud to serve as a minister of a UU congregation. Now that said, being a UU parish minister is sometimes rather difficult, as my wife will attest. Now I've officially been the minister here a little over a year, and I can tell you from firsthand experience that it's not the easiest gig. Here's just one reason why. As I've noted several times from this pulpit, UUs are part of the free church tradition. That means that our church polity comes directly from our Puritan ancestors, and we do not operate under a traditional religious hierarchy. Our hierarchy is inverted. Every UU congregation is ruled by its members. The members democratically select their representative leaders. We leaders serve at the pleasure of you, our fellow members. Therefore, every Sunday when I speak before you, I'm delivering a message to my own bosses. Now, that's something that ministers and priests from a traditional hierarchical religion don't have to worry about. They get appointed to parishes by a bishop or an overseer, not the people they directly minister to. And one advantage of that kind of setup is those ministers and priests can maybe feel a little more comfortable about preaching hard truths to their parishioners because they don't have to worry about getting fired by them. But UU ministers, every Sunday, preach to people who have the power to cast them out of the pulpit. When I set about crafting what I know is going to be a challenging message, that fact weighs on my mind. How far and hard am I going to push the people who choose to employ me? Shall I play it safe? Feed you nothing but comfortable messages that will simply reinforce your pre-existing notions of what the world looks like and how it should work. Merely lead you in cheering for your pre-identified heroes and booing your predetermined villains. Do I simply try to make all of us feel good about ourselves all the time? Tell y'all to just keep on doing what you're doing, what you've always been doing, because it's great. In essence, become your professional religious yes man. Or do I, in a spirit of love and a spirit of humility, push you, gently force you into a place of intellectual, moral, and spiritual discomfort? Drive you as a community to examine and evaluate yourself with a critical eye, to occasionally reconsider everything you think you know or believe, so that after that process of critical self-evaluation, you can, with a renewed appreciation, hold tighter to that good which you already possess, but also identify, discard, and even destroy that which is holding you back from living your highest values and being your best self. In my heart, I believe that second option is what most UUs really want. We want to live an examined life, and we're open to continually re-examining it because we refuse the proposition that revelation is sealed. We agree that new insight and innovation can and should inform our lives today and maybe even change the way that we live. That's another part of what makes us Unitarian Universalist. So with all this in mind, I've been reflecting for some time now on what it means to be a good UU minister. Y'all know that I like analogies. I think they can be really powerful. So I wondered to myself, what might be the best analogy or metaphor that can help guide me in my service to this UU congregation? So I started with a very traditional metaphor for a minister, that of shepherd. Some of you already know the term pastor is derived from the Latin term for herdsman or shepherd. But this fact actually might be part of the reason you don't hear a lot of UU ministers referred to as pastor. I once heard a story about a UU congregant who became incensed when someone referred to his minister as a pastor. "A pastor is a shepherd," he exclaimed. "So if he's a pastor, then that makes all of us sheep." Now his point is well taken. I don't think I've ever met a UU who has struck me as being sheep-like. Nevertheless, I have to admit that the image of the minister as shepherd is an intriguing one, and I plan to maybe someday do a sermon on it. Most of us today in America don't really understand what a shepherd is or what a shepherd does. The modern, or at least semi-modern, American equivalent of an ancient shepherd would actually be the cowboy. And looking at parish ministry through that lens yields some really interesting insights. But not today. Another metaphor specifically for UU ministers suggested by a UU minister, specifically the Reverend Mark DeWolf, is that of rabbi. That too is an intriguing analogy. DeWolf suggests that rabbis are primarily teachers, and they're often considered by their synagogues to be professional Jews. That is, they are expected to perform and model the teachings and tenets of Judaism on a professional scale. DeWolf's essay is really worth reading. He goes into some depth on the similarities that he sees between UU congregations and Jewish synagogues. But I have to say that the idea of being a professional Unitarian Universalist is a rather daunting concept. Frankly, I'm probably not the best person for that job. I don't have the 7 principles and 6 sources memorized verbatim. I don't listen to NPR. I don't celebrate Shalika, you know. So I guess if there is one analogy or metaphor for being a UU minister that really resonates with me personally, I would say that it is that of the physical trainer. Most of you probably understand what physical trainers do, even if you've never personally hired one. Maybe you've added a few pounds since high school. You know, your cardio isn't quite where you'd like it. You want to get healthier, look better, be the best you that you can be, or at least the best you that you're willing to sacrifice to be. So you decide that you're going to start going to the gym, but you know, there's a lot of weird equipment there. The whole environment is confusing, maybe intimidating, or maybe you're not sure what parts of your body you really want to focus on, or in what order to do the exercises. Or maybe you just recognize that you'd like to have an external source of motivation. So you hire a trainer, someone that you pay to help you achieve your health goals. A good trainer listens to his clients. He'll work with you to understand what your goals are. He'll design a workout regimen to help you achieve your goals. Then he'll help you execute that regimen regularly. A good trainer knows how to motivate and inspire you to stick to your plan, and it's your plan, to get the results that you have set for yourself. On the tough days, when you're feeling really down and you're ready to quit, the good trainer recognizes this and is there with a word of encouragement and a helping hand to lift you up. On other days, when you might be giving up because maybe you're being a little lazy, the good trainer will point this out to you, sometimes more sternly than others, and drive you to push out that last rep, to sprint that last lap, to give that last attempt that he can see is inside of you even when you can't see it. At the end of the day, the good trainer helps you get the results that you want. And of course, if after time there are no results, well, then you fire the trainer. Or you just start going to a different trainer or a different gym altogether. I think UU ministers are like physical trainers, and the client is the entire congregation. Collectively, the congregation sets goals for itself, what it wants to be or do or look like in the world. And I'm not just talking about attendance figures or pledge dollars. I'm talking about what kind of impact the congregation wants to have in its community. What values does it want to incarnate in this world? Whom will it choose to serve? All of this information is often embedded in a strategic plan or a mission statement or a vision statement. So the congregation contracts with a minister who believes that he or she can help that congregation become what it wants to be. The minister builds a relationship with the congregation, and then he pushes and pulls, teaches and preaches, sweats and sojourns with that congregation. And over time, when the congregation looks in the mirror, it should see results. But the thing is, to see those results, the trainer can't lift the weights for you. He can't run the miles for you. I mean, he could, but what good would that be to you? The trainer's job isn't to do the exercises himself. His job is to help inspire and train you to do it. And ultimately, that is one of the things about UUs that I love most. They are very good, not necessarily perfect, but usually really good about living their values. We pride ourselves on being a church of deeds, not creeds. We bind ourselves through covenants to live our faith, to act, and to serve. UUs refuse to vicariously live their faith through their minister or anyone else for that matter. This leads to a final metaphor I'd like to suggest for the relationship between a minister and his or her congregation. This one was inspired by Benjamin Zander, the music director and conductor of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra. In one of my all-time favorite TED Talks, Zander relates an epiphany he had about what it really means to be a good conductor. Zander says, "Now, I had an amazing experience. I was 45 years old. I'd been conducting for 20 years, and I suddenly had a realization. The conductor of an orchestra doesn't make a sound. Let that sink in for a second. My picture appears on the front of the CD, but the conductor doesn't make a sound. He depends on his ability to make other people powerful. And that changed everything for me. I realized my job was to awaken possibility in other people. Now that's good advice for any leader, but especially ministers, I think. Because when you think about it, a congregation is a lot like an orchestra. Everybody has their own part to play. Everyone has their own special instrument. Some of us are woodwinds, percussion, some of us are strings, but we all come together. And when we bring those diverse gifts, talents, and perspectives into harmony with one another, when we do that, we become powerful. And we make some beautiful music together. And when it comes time for the performance, the conductor, who is often the most visible part of the orchestra, doesn't make a single sound. What I realized from Xander is that as a metaphorical orchestra, what we do here on Sunday morning, right now, what we're doing, this thing we call church, this thing that we call worship, it's not the actual performance. This is just rehearsal. This is where we pour over the sheet music, tune up our instruments, where we figure out how we're all going to fit together. This is where the conductor actually uses his or her voice to stop and explain things to the musicians, to move the orchestra towards becoming harmonious and one. This is just rehearsal. The actual performance happens beyond these walls. The performance happens when we go out into that parking lot and into the streets and back to our homes and to our places of employment, to our schools. That is where our music is actually played. And like during any performance, no one's listening to the conductor, they're listening to the musicians. If the musical score that we have chosen to perform is in fact calling us to change the world, as our mission statement says, well, we can't change the world without engaging it. We can't change the world from inside our little building. We have to carry our faith out into the world. Living our values beyond these walls is what will make us a powerful church worthy of the title Unitarian Universalist. And as much as I love what we do together on Sunday mornings, this is not our core. This is not what defines us. If we are not to be a church of doctrine and dogma and creed, then let us be a church of love and justice and action. So let's get out there and make some noise. Blessed be.